So many desires, or as many desires, so many blankets. Covering the radiance of the Spirit. We have to uncover to discover. We have to uncover, discover. We have to uncover, discover.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Divine Discoveries podcast. We're at episode number 20, and we have a very, very intriguing topic. I think most people would be a little apprehensive sometimes to discuss this, but we're going to talk about the topic of death and the afterlife of the soul, so the journey of the soul beyond death. But before we do that, we'll go ahead and do the prayers. Om Sadguru Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Sarvamangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute. Om Dum Durgaye Namaha. Om Aim Saraswati Swaha. Om Shri Mahalakshmi Namaha. Om Shri Mahakalikaye Namaha. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardhanam Urvarkameva Vandanan Mrityor Mokshiyamamratat. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha. Om Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Pandurangaya. Om Apadam Apahartaram Dataram Sarvasampadam Lokabhiramam Shri Ramam Bhuyo Bhuyo Namamyaham Shri Rama Jai Rama Jai Jai Rama. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardaram Devaki Paramanandam Shri Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum. Om Klim Krishnaya Namaha. Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Thank you once again, everyone, for tuning in. I'd like to turn the floor over to Vikram. Some of you may be new to the show, so he'll clue you in on how you can connect with us.
Thank you so much, Prad. And as always, thank you everyone for listening to us and for sharing your feedback and sharing your comments. And we always request everyone to spread the word, and there's lots of ways to connect to us. First and foremost, we are available to connect online. So you can follow us on Instagram with the title divine_discoveries_108. You can also find us on Facebook, and you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of the major listening platforms. And please do like, share, and subscribe, and spread the word. We appreciate our listeners, and we appreciate your encouragement.
I would just like to request everyone to rate us, please, as well, because that way we can know how we're doing, and also let us know through email if we can do better or if there's any topic that interests you. We'd love to entertain it, and certainly it would help us to research any topic that you all would be interested in. So, Vikram, in our last episode, we touched on this magnanimous term called karma, and all, sort of described it the best we could in terms of all its facets and the different types of karma. And it was a pretty hard-hitting topic, and it's eye-opening how a lot of what we do in our life is when we don't realize the repercussions of it, and how it comes back to us. So, we talked about the 4 categories of karma: sanchit, prarabdha, kriyamana, agami, and how, this cycle of karma, or this law of karma rather, accumulation of karma, makes us come back in this world over and over again. And, I kind of wanted to focus this episode on the concept of death and, what happens to the soul during that process and then after that process. It's a very intriguing subject, but it's a very grim subject. I feel like, at least that's how it's perceived. I'm not saying it's grim for me necessarily. I think I'm quite fascinated by that concept of death because it's a reality, right? It's something that we know is inevitable. We know in the back of our minds that that's going to happen to us at some point. But I feel like somewhere our mind and our ego play games with us, make us feel like even if loved ones around us pass away, we feel the sorrow and we feel the pain of losing that individual, or, it could be a pet, or it could be, a family member or somebody who's a close friend or whatever. We've seen or experienced something like that already, and, there will be more such experiences. However, we think somewhere that it's not going to happen to us. We know it's going to happen, but then somewhere we superficially think that, it's not going to happen today, or it's not going to happen tomorrow, or it's not going to happen this year. So we kind of fool ourselves into thinking that we have a long way to go before this even comes close to striking us. And I think that's I guess you can say ignorance or what have you, that unfortunately overcomes our mind. But why do you think, Vikram, that, we feel that something like this we know that it's inevitable, and we know that there's no age limit for death. It could happen anytime, as I said. So why do you think that we feel so grim about this subject of death? Because quite often in our families, I feel like many a time, if you even utter the word death, or you sometimes even reference it to yourself or whatever, or, they immediately want to hush you and say, no, don't say that. It's like it's something that's inauspicious, But I liked how Pramod Uncle put it in the Bhagavad Gita book, that he said death is as real as birth is, and it's as relevant in our life, right? But somehow we just want to close the door on that. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, and that's absolutely true. Death is always a taboo topic. Pretty much anybody you talk to, they don't want to talk about death. When in fact, we know that death is very much like, actually, not even, I wouldn't even say birth. Birth is not aparam satya, but death is, because you don't know if you're going to be born or not, but you definitely know that you will die one day. And I think that there's several reasons as to why it is not as openly discussed. I think first and foremost, just at a human level, I think, sometimes we tend to run away from truths that make us uncomfortable. And I think death is one of those, right? Death is, it's a final thing. There's a finality to it. People look at it as, okay, once you die, everything that you are experiencing, everything that you're seeing, everything that you're touching, everything that you're tasting, every relationship that you have, all of that will go away, which is true. But then, if you think about it more deeply, as outlined in the Gita, for instance, is that we all feel this way because we have that attachment to everything material around us, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And it isn't easy, of course, to just one day be like, okay, I'm not attached to my relative or whatever. It's not easy to do that. But it is also very true that if you don't have attachment to things, it is easy to accept whatever is true and whatever is reality. So I think going back to that, I think it's simply just because it is the only truth that is, and it's something that people can't escape from. I think it makes them nervous, and it's also rooted in the attachment that everybody has to the material world.
Yeah, absolutely. But you do agree that it is a subject, I feel, that should be broached, should be should be spoken about within a family, or, when I understand that, if you feel like your children are too young to bring that topic up to them or something, but at some point when they grow up a little bit older, and you feel like the time is right, their maturity level is there, I think it's important to talk about it, because I don't think it should be a taboo topic. I personally don't see it that way, because I think, like I said, it's reality. It's something that everybody has to face. And it's good to have that mental preparation for that possibility to happen to anybody, either to themselves or to somebody around them, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And I mean, I think this would be very hard to explain to somebody that's very young. But,
Right.
The way I look at death is that, okay, we come to this material world. We have great things happen to us. We have bad things happen to us. But living in the material world is broadly a struggle, right? Because you're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to survive. You're trying to, fulfill your responsibilities. It at the end of the day, everything that we do in the material world, whatever's good, whatever's bad, is a stress. Whatever bad we face, that's a stress because it gives us pain and, physical anguish, mental anguish. And then whatever good happens, it usually happens because we have also struggled a little bit and fought for some of those good things to happen. So either way, it's stressful. But the way I look at death is that your soul could be moving on to the next entity that it will enter, right? You will take birth in whatever form is next. That's one aspect of it. You can start afresh, okay? One should look at it in that positive term. If you led a life where you did all wrong things, you can start afresh. Even if it's a lower thing, you can start again, right? Okay, so that's one aspect. If you did things right, you will be cut from the bondage of this material world, and you will go into the maker,
Yeah.
And what is more blissful than that, where you go into that which is all knowing, that which is all true, that which is all happy. We all pray. We all pray to God every day. But then death is a step closer to that God, yet we are scared of it. Death
Yeah,
is the
exactly.
closest way to get to that God, not sitting in a, mandir and praying. No, death is what gets you there. So
Right.
that's a perception I have is, you don't fear it. You first of all, you try to be the best person you can be during your lifetime, but then when you get to that stage, you go to the thing that will give you ultimate stress-free happiness. But I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've felt this. For a person that has kind of a traditional life, meaning they live till beyond their 80s, beyond their 90s, right? If you notice what that person is like, let's say when they're 90 years old, you know, I feel, or at least I've seen a lot of people that by that age, they are a little less materialistic and they find joys in very, very simple things. As we go through life, we do come to a stage naturally where we are becoming a less materialistic. And it's almost as if we are subconsciously trying to detach ourselves from materialism to some extent. Okay, it is what it is, and I am ready.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think people also forget that, of course, when one loses a grandparent, for instance, it's very sad. But you also see how much many people suffer in old age, and when they pass away, they are actually letting go of that suffering. So that's just another perspective on it.
No, that's so true. Yeah, I think later, as you age, you kind of know that, these kind of things everything's temporary around you, and you start to lose the attraction towards those things. Yeah. So that's a very natural part of aging. Absolutely. So here we go with Guruji's video, speaking a little bit more on this concept of death.
In this world, nothing looks like certain. Everything constantly changes, including the galaxies. But one thing, without any doubt, everyone can say certainly, Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu. All that is born is definitely going to die. In that, there is no uncertainty. Yama, god of death, is merciless in his action. Just like there is a time for birth, there is a time for death also. It is not that we should be afraid of death, but we have to definitely learn how to face the death, how to enjoy death as a blissful departure from this body rather than a terrible, painful exit. Unless we learn that, that fear will always be there. Just to avoid that fear or forget that fear, people have invented several things to keep the mind busy. No matter how long a man could live, or anything visible in this world could live, including the galaxies, all of them will definitely have a beginning and an end. We are not here to say that end is complete ending. Fortunately, we have wonderful philosophy about that. End is only the beginning of the further lives in other lokas as well. The more interesting lokas, more convenient lokas or spheres above, more shining, more joyful lokas above, from where we have come. They are not something new to us because our soul was there. From there we have come. And this opportunity to come back here is given to earn more merits, less karma, to work out karma and understand our dharma, so that before the departure, we have prepared. The whole life is a preparation, so that we remember God at the time of departure. अंतकाले च मामेव स्मरन् मुक्त्वा कलेवरम् यः प्रयाति समद्भावम् याति नान्यत्र संशयः. In a very profound statement, Lord Shri Krishna, the Lord of Yoga, declares in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that entire life should be a preparation, prayer, and meditation in the midst of all activities, so that the hour of departure will be one of God consciousness, God's holy name, and no confusion, no pain. For such a person who has prepared the entire life as a prayer, as a meditation, for him the departure is one of very joyful departure. Attended by devas, the angels, archangels, celestial spiritual music and symphony, darshan of God as Shiva, Krishna, whichever aspect he has propitiated. And therefore that moksha which he is going to attain either immediately or while living or during the departure, if his plane of consciousness is settled in the brow center or the thousand-petaled lotus, then the departure is definitely to the kingdom of heaven. In the next stanza, the Lord declares in the 8th chapter, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam त्यजत्यन्ते कलेवरम् तं तमेवैति कौन्तेय सदा भावितः whatever engages the mind of a person while living on earth constantly, night and day, that becomes the predominating thought at the time of departure from this body. As a man has lived his life, so shall be his death as well. And during the time of that death, whatever engaged his mind throughout his life again and again, whatever he was constantly thinking, that becomes the dominating thought at the time of departure. And that verily decideth the loka where he has to go, and the life or the body or the womb in which he will be attracted to come back again to the round of rebirth. Telling these words, Shri Krishna declares finally, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu manusmara yudhyacha mayarpita mano buddhir mame vaishyasya samshayam. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, which means therefore, all the time, ma manusmara, remember me, remember the great self, remember God, and yudhyacha, fight the battle of life. Surrendering your mind, intellect, ego, and all good and bad karmas unto me. At the time of departure, clean and cleared of all the karma, you will have pure consciousness. You will see me coming to take your soul to the transcendental abode where the sun shines not, moon shines not, stars shine not, reaching which the soul never again returns to the abode of misery. This is why always the sages, saints recommend to think of God all the time. That's why the initiation, the mantra, the puja, the pilgrimages, the gifts, the dana, dharma, all good things as much as possible. Because nothing else, including his own body, a person can carry with him. Good and bad karma, impressions, samskaras will definitely go with him. And our life is so short. Death could be any moment. There is no guarantee, okay, only after you were squeezing the orange of life, last when there is no energy left at all in you, then I am going to call you first on the phone, and then when I have fixed the funeral home, etc., then I will come to take you. There is no guarantee. Like you pray, you meditate, you get detached from the body, from the mind, from the ego, while living in this body, which is the most exalted state of all. That is called Jivan Mukti, or liberation while living in this body. That is the goal of life.
Yeah. So Guruji touched on a lot of the things, some of the things that we said. And of course, he took it further and said that, we all can be free in the truest sense of that word and attain liberation while we're still in this body, in this world, in this current present incarnation that we're in. So it's a great opportunity that we have, that I think he alluded to sages and saints, but he himself was a great saint who was delivering that message also to so many souls that were seeking his grace. So, it really hits home that, we have to purify and work on ourselves and do our best to do all our karmas as consciously as possible. The types of things that we're going to talk about today, Vikram, is really eye-opening. And during my research, I actually started to read. I didn't read the actual Puran itself, but I read basically like a Cliff Notes version of it, where the main gist of it is given to the reader. But could you take a guess on which Purana that I read to get? It's actually called the Holy Book on Death. Any guesses?
I feel like I've heard this, or I know this, but I cannot place it. I cannot place which one it is.
Yeah. So I'll rule a couple of them out. So, but there are other ones that obviously speak about death and afterlife and things revolving around this concept of death. But Shiv Puran is not the one. But in Shiv Puran, it obviously mentions, because Lord Shiva is the presiding deity that represents destruction, death, and all that. And basically in Shiv Puran, there are descriptions of omens or signs of what one can experience or what one may face when death is coming close. So that's described in the Shiv Puran. And I'm just giving just a brief summary of that. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is also not the one, in the chapters, I would say 16 through 26 of Canto 5, the different heavens and lokas and hellish planets and spheres, all of these things are explained in great detail as well. So what could happen in the afterlife for the soul, that's also mentioned in the Bhagavatam. But the one that I'm alluding to was the Garuda Purana. Yeah.
Okay,
And
interesting.
I had no idea until I started researching this topic of death that the Garuda Purana was even remotely centered around this concept. So a lot of it is similar to the Bhagavatam and so many others, the Skanda Purana, and there's so many other Puranas, where the setting is the same, Naimisharanya, in the forest, where Sutta Goswami is talking to Shaunaks and all the other assembled sages and rishis, and they're all asking him, because he's had contact and learned about these Puranas directly from Sage Veda Vyasa, who was the great author of these Puranas. And in this case, they were asking him about, the reality of death and, wanting to know more about it. And so he started to narrate to them the Garuda Purana. And for those of you who don't know, Shri Garuda is the vehicle of Lord Vishnu. So Lord Vishnu, when he travels throughout the lokas, he sits on top of this eagle named Garuda. And Garuda is a great devotee of Lord Vishnu's. And he was very intrigued because he's seeing from an aerial view how beings on this earth are suffering, right? And he feels very compassionate and merciful and feels very badly for what the souls are enduring in this world. And he seeks to understand more about why a soul who is ultimately a spark of his Lord Vishnu, why are they having to suffer like this? So this conversation comes around where he's actually asking Lord Vishnu directly, these kind of questions. And then Lord Vishnu actually responds with, the appropriate answers and clarifies all his doubts and his concern. Basically, he eases his mind and makes him understand what all this is about, And so this conversation is what the Garuda Purana is all about. So it kind of reminds me of similar settings where I feel like somehow there's a divine orchestration where a devotee is sort of used in that sense, or utilized as one who inquires directly with Bhagwan to find out about these deep secrets for the benefit of the people of this time. The Bhagavad Gita is another example where Arjuna was confused and He had cold feet at the worst moment, you know. So his questions led to the Bhagavad Gita sermon being delivered, and that's what we're benefiting from that great text. And then similarly, you know, there's Sage Narad, who goes to Vaikuntha and speaks with Lord Vishnu about what's a great puja that one can do in the Kali Yuga to ease their suffering. And he says Satyanarayana Puja. So that comes from the Skanda Purana. So it's amazing how these stories are very similar. And it's just a different disciple or devotee of the Lord who has these inquiries based on their compassion for the people of this world. So yeah, Garuda Purana goes into great detail about this process of death. And Lord Vishnu goes through and answers all of Garuda's questions. And he asks him a lot of specific questions. How does one die? Why does one die in a particular manner? You know, the soul's exit from the body. How does that happen? What happens to the soul immediately after? Is it reborn right away? All these other things, which are questions that we would probably have as well. And many a time, you know, obviously in this mortal world, we don't have the divine eyes to be able to see any soul activity happening. All we know is that when we know that life force, prana, and the Atman exit the body, that's when the body is still and lifeless. And it's interesting that many a time the attachment is with the body, but once the soul is gone, that body obviously is going to decay and rot. And ultimately it has to be buried or it has to be cremated. So what one thought they were loving their whole life was not really the body, but it was rather the spirit that was within. So that's when we realize. And we also say that person passed away, or the person has left us, or whatever it is, right? So that's when we're consciously aware the true being has left, right? And what's left behind was not that true being. It was just an outer covering or a shell. So, and I got some information also from Guruji's book called Liberation from Karma and Rebirth. So the Garuda Purana and this book, in which Guruji also referenced the Garuda Purana to make certain points. That's what kind of intrigued me that, oh, I need to read about this, because, you know, it's really detailed and amazing. And it's interesting that the death process itself, right? One is assuming it's a natural death. So at the time of death, when one is about to depart, there are 4 types of dukkhas, or painful experiences that one can go through. The first one is called Vishleshaja dukkha, okay? And that means the pain of the soul departing or being forcefully pulled out of the body. So as much attachment as we have to our body while living, the same amount of intense pain the soul experiences when it's ripped out of that body, because that soul felt like I am this body, and that attachment is almost it's compared by Guruji in this sense, that imagine 2 pieces of paper being crazy glued together, and then you're trying to separate those pieces of paper. And that cannot be done without ripping it apart, right? So this is literally like, imagine like skin or flesh or something being ripped off, you know? It's so painful. But this is even tenfold or 100-fold that kind of pain. So that teaches us that the strong attachment to I am this body is going to cause that kind of a pain. Speech leaves first out of all their senses. So many a time they want to be able to communicate. Their mind is still working, their brain is still functioning. They're able to think about something that they want to communicate, but then they're just not able to, because they say the bile and phlegm and certain chemicals within the body are basically creating a blockage in your throat, and you may not be able to speak after a certain point. So communication becomes difficult. Then vision starts to become blurry. And you start seeing shadows. Sometimes you start seeing figures or certain beings that other people in the room can't see. So even if your family members are there, you're starting to get fearful about the visions that you're seeing, and other people, and you're starting to say, "Oh, they're coming to get me. They're coming to get me. Save me, help me, help me." And all the other family members are like looking around like they don't know what you're talking about, you know? And as we've mentioned in another episode, we said that hearing is the last sense to leave you. That can be a good and a bad thing, okay? The reason is it depends on what you're hearing. As you're about to depart, if your family's wailing and crying and weeping very loudly and painfully emotional, distraught family members, that can bring a lot of uneasiness to the soul. So that's not what you want a dying person to hear. So they often say, chant something holy, chant the holy name, maybe put some bhajans on or put some peaceful music, something that can help that soul remember the divine. Because as Guruji said, that last conscious thought that you have is of utmost importance, right? In terms of where you're headed, where you're going to go next, where you're going to land next. So we have to take that aspect of it very seriously. And of course, the last thought will not miraculously be God. As Guruji said, make a habit of it from now. Make a habit of it. Because if you make a habit of thinking of something, that's what's going to come to you. And so we want the one that's going to help liberate us. So I'm going to read something to you from the Garuda Purana, which also goes a little bit more into detail about how the 5 elements leaves one. You know the 5 elements, right? That we're made up of? Earth, water, fire, air, and the ether, right? So first, the earth element within the body collapses. The dying man feels heavy. His limbs, once capable of lifting swords or children, feel like lead weights. He tries to move his hand, but it refuses to obey. The structure is failing. Next, the water element dries up. The mouth becomes parched. No amount of water can quench this thirst, for it is the drying of the life force itself. The blood thickens, the eyes lose their moisture and turn dull. Then the fire element extinguishes. The warmth leaves the extremities. The feet and hands turn cold as ice. The digestive fire, which burned for 70 or 80 years, flickers and dies. The body can no longer generate that heat. Finally, the air element becomes chaotic. The breath, which was once rhythmic wave, becomes a storm. It rattles in the throat, the death rattle, as it's referred to, and the heaving chest fights for every atom of oxygen, but the lungs are turning into stone. So Lord Vishnu says, Garuda, realize this. The dying man is witnessing the destruction of his own universe. The sun of his eyes is setting. The wind of his breath is stopping. The earth of his body is crumbling. He is terrified because he thinks he is dying. He does not know that only his coat is being removed. So this is the physical body shutting down part, right? So this is the pain, Vishleshaja Dukkha. Another one is called Mohaja Dukkha, okay? That's the departing soul feels intense emotional pain due to weeping family members, like I mentioned, who are present around the dying individual. There's another dukkha, which the third one is called Anutapaja Dukkha. One experiences intense feelings of regret for a wasted life where one did not take the opportunity to progress towards God. So you know how, like, when you're dying, you kind of realize that, oh, this was something that I was supposed to do, and I missed the goal, or I didn't do any efforts towards salvation or moksha, right? So that's one other painful experience one can feel. And the last one described is Agami Drishya Darshanaja Dukkha. That means the departing soul begins to see the horrifying demon-like figures of the messengers of Yamraj. And, it's also interesting, Guruji mentioned in one of his satsangs, and I actually came to know that even scientists have seen this in a dying person's brainwave activity, that one's life flashes by their eyes within a span of maybe 30 seconds. Major happenings of your life are shown to you like a quick movie. And like I said, even science has backed that up. So it's very interesting that, you're reminded of your good and bad deeds towards the end. Now, here's the interesting part, okay? What happens to the said soul that has departed the body, and in what manner did that soul depart, right? It depends on your karmas and your thought process. That last thought also influences this. But largely it's based on how you've lived your life for the most part. So this is where karma comes really heavily into play. You know how we call this body the city of 9 gates? That's what it's referred to in the Bhagavad Gita as well. So we have our 2 eyes, nose, the 2 ears, mouth, the genital area, the rectum, and all that stuff, right? So the soul will depart from one of these 9, and that will determine how spiritually evolved they are, and it will determine which loka they go to, and it also determines, when they come back to this material world, what species they'll be born as. And this was eye-opening to me. So the very sinful ones who have no care for somebody's life, or they just do a lot of sinful acts, and they have no remorse for such things, even during the time of death, they are said to be leaving the body from one of the gates that's from the lower extremities, so from your waist down. And those souls are said to, of course, go through hellish experiences in their afterlife, but once they're reborn, they're usually reborn in worm, insect species, something like that. They will not be given a human birth. They're regressing in the evolution. And that's quite a scary proposition. So it reminds you, don't act carelessly and don't act egotistically, because that's what ends up being the downfall for so many of these people, that they think they're so powerful. But at the end of the day, every single action you do, it counts. And we have to be very conscious, like I said, about that. Now, the book also tells us about the gates, okay? So the rectum, for those bound by lust, greed, the soul exits through the anus, destined for the lower hellish worlds. The genitals, for those obsessed with sex, the soul leaves through the reproductive organ. The mouth, for those attached to food or appetite, the soul leaves through the mouth. The eyes, for those who lived a visual life attached to beauty or art, it leaves through the eyes. The ears, for those attached to news or rumors, they depart from the ears. The nose, for those controlled by the breath. And then the crown, which is on top of our skull there, is called the Brahmarandra. It's the crown of the head. This is the gate of the yogi, the one who's very spiritually evolved. For that soul has practiced meditation and devotion, the life force bursts through the top of the skull, sometimes cracking it physically when it departs. Sometimes the skull is cracked physically and ascends directly to the higher planes of light. So look at the detail, in the Garuda Purana. And then moving along. So here's an interesting point, where the soul has departed, right? But when we say departed, it doesn't mean that it's flown away somewhere or it's so far away from where the body just, is laying, right? It can literally be in the same hospital room or in the bedroom or wherever this person died, and the other family members are there. And this soul is still not able to come to terms with the fact that it has died. It still has attachment to that life and to those people. And what it does is that while they're crying and weeping over the dead body, the soul is standing in a corner saying, hey, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. Look at me, I'm here, I'm not gone anywhere. And they can't hear him or her, you know? And it tries very hard to get back into the body, apparently. It tries, but it cannot. It cannot. So it takes on this type of yoni or type of species, celestial species called preta yoni. It's called preta. Okay, we've heard bhut, pret, like that. So that pret. So pret is a wandering spirit. It's not a ghost yet, right? So bhut is called ghost, but pret is just a wandering spirit who's looking for basically assistance from its family members to do the right rituals that are prescribed by the Vedas and even mentioned in these Puranas, which is these 13 days of rituals that one must do in honor of the departed soul. And to basically, not just to honor them, but basically to help them find peace as they journey forward. Because the journey forward can be very, very difficult for one who doesn't receive the pindadan, as they call it, or this, you know, the offerings through the havan that usually a son can do. But if one doesn't have a son, then a wife or a daughter or a friend can step in and do it. But primarily it's the duty of a son or the eldest son. So this interesting thing I never knew about this is in the first 10 days of these 13 days of the puja rituals and funeral rites that are done according to Hindu tradition, this soul is then forming a new body, a spiritual body, if you will, with similar makeup as a human body, limbs and everything being practically the same. And those rituals are helping that being form these, over the first 10 days, form these limbs and a head and everything. It's just incredible. It's kind of compared to how over the 9 months, how a fetus, the embryo, how it turns into like the baby that's born. So that type of formation is described, but it's just in a period of 10 days. Okay. So day 1, the foundation. On the first day of death, when the pinda is offered, or the rice ball, the head is formed. The traveler gets a face to look forward and a brain to process the reality of his new state. Then, day 2, the senses. On the second day, the eyes, ears, and nose are formed. Now the soul can see the path, which is currently dark, and hear the instructions of the guides. Day 3, the shoulders. On the third day, the neck, the shoulders, and arms are constructed. The traveler needs strength. He will have to carry the weight of his own karma, and strong shoulders are required. So day 4, the chest. On the fourth day, the chest and heart are formed. This is crucial, for the heart is the seat of memory. With this, the soul processes the grief of leaving. Day 5, the belly. On the 5th day, the stomach and navel are created. This quiets the terrible burning hunger I spoke of. The soul feels the first sensation of fullness and relief. Day 6, the vital parts. On the 6th day, the thighs and bowels are formed. Day 7, the bones. On the 7th day, the bones and marrow are created. The structure becomes solid. Days 8 and 9, the limbs. On the 8th and 9th day, the legs and feet are finished. This is vital, Garuda, for the journey to Yama city is long, 86,000 yojanas. Without spiritual feet, the soul would have to drag itself through the mud of the Vaitarani river. Day 10, the completion. On the 10th day, the hunger and thirst are fully pacified. The body is complete. It is no longer a confused ghost. It is now a traveler ready for the road. This is why Vishnu emphasized the mourning period is 10 days. If the family cries but does not offer pinda, or the final offering for the betterment of that soul, the soul remains headless or legless, suffering immense pain. The greatest gift you can give the dead is not your tears, but your rice. The offering of the rice balls. Yeah. And then we have the 11th day of the 13. So once the body is built, Vishnu continued, the 11th day marks a shift. The mourning lifts slightly, the house is cleaned, the impurity fades. On this day, there's a release of a bull which was traditionally performed. It symbolizes setting a living being free so that the soul may be free. Today, people feed the poor or give to charity. This act of kindness generates punya, or merit, which is transferred to the account of the departed. On the 12th day is the most critical, the Lord said, his eyes shining like the lotus petals. It is the day of graduation. Until now, the soul was a preta, or a wandering spirit. It was alone, but on the 12th day, the ritual of sapindikarana is performed. Imagine 4 pots of water. 3 represent the ancestors, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, who have already crossed over. The 4th pot represents the newly deceased. The priest pours the water from the 4th pot into the other 3. He merges them. In that moment, the status of the soul changes. He ceases to be a preta, and he becomes a pitra, or an ancestor. He is no longer a homeless wanderer. He has been accepted into the community of his forefathers. He has a seat at the table, if you will. So Garuda, if this ritual is not done, the soul remains a ghost. It hovers around the house, causing trouble, creating nightmares, and draining the energy of the family. It does not do this out of malice. It does this out of desperation. It is banging on the door, asking to be let inside. We come to the 13th day. The rituals are over. The priests are fed. The family wears new clothes. They step out of the house for the first time. Why new clothes? Because the traveler has left. The vigil is done. On the 13th day, the Yamadutas, or the messengers of the god of death known as Yama, who were waiting patiently while the body was being built, step forward. They take the soul, now equipped with its sturdy bhoga deha, or a spiritual body of experience, and they turn it away from the earth. The soul takes one last look at its home. It sees that its children are eating again. It sees that life is continuing. And with a mixture of sadness and relief, it turns its face towards the south, towards the terrible and magnificent path to Yampuri. The journey, Garuda, has officially begun. So this kind of puts into perspective, Vikram, why these 13 days are significant and why these rituals are prescribed by our scriptures. And I know you did a play that was centered a little bit around, that touches a little bit about, these funeral rites. And
Yeah, so about almost 4 years ago, I did a play called Death in San Francisco, written by Sujit Saraf, a playwright who's actually based in the Bay Area, if I'm not mistaken. Before I just share a little more about the themes of the play, I'll just share kind of a fun fact, because we were talking a little bit about the subject of death and the perception of it. So, when we announced the play, there was actually a lot of trepidation from audiences whether to come see the play or not. And the reason simply was because it dealt with the topic of death. And so a lot of audiences were not really sure how a play could necessarily bring a lighthearted exploration of it and all that. And many people thought that it would be a very dark kind of comedy or something like that. And fortunately, when people saw the play, I didn't meet a single person who didn't like it and didn't enjoy it and didn't think it was a very unique topic. But in terms of kind of some of the main themes here, this was a play about a Hindu family that live in San Francisco, and the patriarch in the family passes away. But his last wish in his will was that he wants to be cremated in the exact way it's supposed to happen per Hindu rituals. And so if you're living here in the US and you have to follow these rituals to the letter, sometimes it's not always easy to do so. And so the play is really about all the characters trying to figure out how they can fulfill the last wishes of the patriarch. So in that play, I played the patriarch's son, who is tasked with really taking care of a lot of this. But him being an Indian American, he definitely doesn't know exactly how to do it. So a whole bunch of family friends are trying to help him out. And he specifically wants to be cremated on the shore in San Francisco with all the proper rites, which as you can imagine, is there's a lot of legal challenges there and a lot of practical considerations for someone to want to do that. So that's one, thing. The other thing is, trying to find the balance between the traditional Hindu values and then the rituals and then kind of the emotional norms that come when you're navigating through death, but in a Western world. So that's another aspect there. So it was a very unique play, very interesting play. But yes, it dealt with this topic in a lighthearted way that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was very intrigued when I enjoyed the play. I was there, and I thought at that time, I was like, we need, at some point, I didn't know we would do this podcast, but I kind of wanted to have some talk about death like this, where we can put it into perspective as a part of life that one should not shun away or be afraid of talking about. So I'm glad we're doing this topic because I've been looking forward to this for a long time. And your play actually sort of triggered that interest in me, to do this. So I'm glad
wonderful.
I can't believe it's been 4 years actually. So
Yeah.
here we are 4 years later talking about this, and finding the connection to it. But yeah, so here we go, right? So 13 days of the ritual is over. And what would most people think at this point, Vikram? Most people think that the soul will re-enter another body at this point, right? That's most of the time that's not true. The soul has a different journey to go through. Majority of the souls do. There are some instances, like if there's an untimely death or there's a very strong desire or something that warrants this soul to come back to the earth very quickly or instantly even, right? Those are the only rare instances in which a soul will transition from one body to the next in this material world. Otherwise, like majority of the souls, it has to go to the court of Yamraj and meet with Chitragupt. These are all characters that, of course, Yamraj, as I mentioned, is the god of death, and Chitragupta is his secretary who is keeping tabs on all of your karmic balances, and that's through Akashic records, like the ether has recorded all of our karma. So, but before we get there, okay, here's some more hard-hitting facts for you from the Garuda Purana. Depending on what type of soul you are, in the sense, like I said, especially if you went through the lower apertures, you're not going to be treated very well by these servants of Yamraj. They drag you, they put you through a lot of torment and torture, and it's described in great detail. This is a pretty graphic Purana, one that definitely stands apart, and I highly recommend everybody, all of you out there, to read this because you will have a different perspective in your life, for sure. And you'll be a lot more careful about what you do, think, and speak. So before the soul actually makes it to Yamraj's court, that soul is guided by the messengers or the Yamaduts, right? Now, here's the thing. Only a soul that attains moksha at the point of death is attended to by the angels of Vishnu, right? And many of them I heard look like Vishnu. So they actually have 4 arms and all that, just like Jay and Vijay, right? So they actually come to receive you. But most of the time, it's the Yamraj's messengers, okay? Now, if you're largely done well, maybe you didn't attain moksha, but you largely were a good person, they will treat you pretty well, okay? They'll be nice to you. They'll be kind to you. They're not going to drag you with the noose and the rope and the other stuff, right? The weapons. They'll take you nicely to wherever you need to go, okay? But if you're predominantly a sinful person, you're going to experience all the torture in the world, okay? Now, I mentioned that Yamraj's court is at 86,000 mile, or not mile, yojanas. It's called yojanas in Sanskrit. But there are hundreds of thousands of miles of distance, okay? And this spiritual body that your descendant has done the rituals to give you, That's the body that you're going to utilize to walk that whole path. And the terrain is all different types of terrain. You could walk on rocks, you could walk through, on sharp objects, scorching hot ground, like just imagine it's a summer day and you put your feet on the deck. That's hot enough. If you went out on your asphalt, like on your driveway, imagine what that would feel like. So it's like that times a million. And so this is what I'm not trying to exaggerate here. This is really how it is. It's even worse than what you would feel in your body. The kind of pain that you could feel, heat or cold that you can feel, you feel that times a million. That's how it's described. Okay, so it's pretty bad. And you make 16 stops. So you pretty much have to cover a certain distance, and then the Yamdut say, okay, now this is your first stop. So you have to stop at 16 different checkpoints, so to speak, that are described in detail in the Garuda Purana. And finally, when you get through the 16th one, right, you are then having to cross this river called the Vaitarini River. And that river, it could look like a clear river of just water if you've done good. But if you're of the sinful kind, that's going to look like a lot of body fluids mixed up together and boiled, and you have to cross that river. You have to swim through there. So it's like the sludge river, and it's just very, very repulsive for that soul to have to go through that. They're dreading the whole experience. And if they say, hey, help me, help me, help me, the messengers of Yama say, did you help that person? Did you, they'll kind of remind you that, oh, I want water, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty. Just imagine, this soul is thirsty, it's asking for water. And the Yamaduts are saying, you never gave a drink of water to anybody who was thirsty in your life. So why do you expect that you're going to get it? Drink your own sweat and move on. These are the kinds of things that are said. Mm-hmm. And you are going to be chastised. You are going to be ridiculed when you feel like that you should get some sort of relief from all of this. Now, of course, a being in that spiritual realm cannot die, right? So despite all the torture that you experience getting to Yamraj's court or palace, you're not going to die. But you're going to hate that journey. Now, when you finally reach there, right, there are 4 different gates, north, south, east, west, right? It's interesting. So once you actually get in there, through whichever gate that you're meant to get in there with, right, based on your karmas, you can see Yamraj, or the god of death, in a dualistic form. You will see the form that you deserve to see. So there's a Yamraj who looks very, very horrifying and terrifying and super scary, right? And there's another form of him that actually looks very peaceful and angelic, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. And that's based on your karmas, that what kind of vision of Yamraj you get to see. And then he tells Chitragupt, who's the secretary, pull up this guy's records. Let's see what he's done. And then based on your karmas, basically like the sum total of what you, percentage-wise, you then, if you've done even 1%, like say it's 5149, good, then you get to sent up to the upper lokas. And we mentioned these lokas in our Cosmic Creation and Time episode. The earthly sphere, and then there's 6 lokas above, and then there's 7 lokas below that are called the patalas or the talas, right? So the upper regions are where we want to go. If not to God's abode for moksha, we would want to go up and not down. Some people have to go through the hellish regions and the swarga, or the heavenly regions, right? So there could be a mixture or combination of things. But interesting thing is, for you to reach Yama's palace before you actually come to his court, right? I forgot to mention this. It takes 1 full human year. So a lot of people think that, oh, my ancestor who died or my father who died, and then they have a child like within a year, right? say that, for example, or there's a child born in the family, may not be to you, but somebody else. You say, oh, it's a boy, so that must be my father reborn again. We like to make those kind of connections, right? But ultimately, that's probably not true, because until one whole human year has passed, that soul hasn't even made it to Yamraj's palace yet. And then once he makes it there, then he has to, based on his karmic records, experience the fruits or the merits of his good deeds and then the bad deeds. Based on that, he has to go to different lokas or spheres or realms where he has to experience the results of his karma, right? And these are like divine merits or extremely bad sins that you're experiencing. The stuff that's built up in your sanchita karma, remember I mentioned the warehouse of karma that we still have to experience in the material world, that will still remain, But this is like extra credit. When we do something very good or pious or stuff like that, that's when we earn these credits that we can exhaust in these sort of like vacational spheres, what we call heaven, right? But then, like I said, there are various gradations of heaven. The Swarga that we call, where the demigods are there and we see all the celestial apsaras and all dancing and them enjoying themselves, that's just like 2 levels up from here. But the highest loka is where Brahma, the creator, exists before we reach Vaikuntha. The highest loka within the universe is called Satya Loka or Brahma Loka. So if one has really evolved or is a follower or a devotee of Lord Brahma, they make it there. And what happens is some who make it there are not quite ready for moksha yet. So after one kalp or one big aeon passes, those individuals get sent back to the earth, but they are born into very pious families and good families, so they can ultimately finish the job at that point. And the other group is the ones who are devoted to Lord Brahma very strongly. Those people reside in Satyalok until the universe is destroyed. So then when Brahma merges back into Lord Vishnu, all the souls who remained in Satyaloka or Brahmaloka, they go with him as well. So they get moksha that way. So if you make it to Satyaloka, there's a good decent chance that you can earn moksha from there. But any other loka, you have to come back to the earthly sphere. So that's in a nutshell how this whole process of afterlife can be for the soul. But what did you think of all this, Vikram, of the Garuda Purana, the details?
Yeah, wow. I mean, a lot of this I didn't know, to be honest, but
neither did I.
yeah. I mean, it's fascinating how, not only how in-depth the whole journey and the whole process here is, but it's also amazing how there's a lot of significance to each step of the way. It's not just, you pass away and then it's like there's a significance to everything and there's a logic to everything. And I actually don't think many people really know about this or have even thought much about it. So I hope, I hope that through our episode here, people will think more about it, but also think more about it in a more practical way and not in a way where you have to be fearful or because as we were saying, this is Param Satya. It's one of the ultimate truths. So why be scared of something that is unavoidable?
Right. And, it's interesting. I think even Garuda asks Vishnu after he gets all this description of all of this, and he says, why are you putting these poor souls through this kind of experience? I'm so terrified just hearing about all of these details from you. This is Garuda saying this out of compassion for us. And he says, and Lord Vishnu says, that one is really putting themselves through the torment. It's not I who is punishing them, but it's really their own guilt, their own realization of what they've done wrong. that becomes the heavy weight for them to carry. So during that journey to Yamraj's palace, one who's sinful carries the weight of his sins on his back. And that makes the whole experience even worse for him. And really, then that's when the person realizes, I was given an opportunity to do good, and this is what I did to myself. So a lot of the torture that they will go through in these hellish planets is very much in tune with what they've done to hurt somebody here. So I highly recommend all of you, once again, to read the Garuda Purana. It is eye-opening, and it really will, if anything, I think it will make every human being think deeper about what they want to do in their life, and the steps they take. Every action will be a lot more consciously thought out, which is necessary in this world. Before I forget, I'd like to mention the actual book that I read to understand and learn about what is actually in the Garuda Purana and what this Purana is all about. So the book is called The Garuda Purana, Unveiling the Secrets of Life, Death, and Beyond by Naveen Goyal. It's a really wonderful book. So I'd also like to include that information in the description for this episode, so I'll do that. And I'll also include the YouTube links for Vikrum's play called Death in San Francisco that we spoke about, in case any of you listeners are interested in checking it out. So with that, Vikram, I'd like to actually go to some Puranic stories, and I'd like to start with you, the great storyteller, and tell us about this story from the Katha Upanishad.
Right. So this is actually a fairly popular, and it is the story of Yamraj and Nachiketa. So Nachiketa he's a young boy. And basically what happens is that, his father is performing a sacrifice, and his father promises to give away all his possessions. Now, while this is happening, little Nachiketa sees this, and he sees that his father is donating, cows that are old and not very useful. So he says, Father, why are you doing this? This is not useful. You should be giving something that can actually benefit the people, or benefit the rituals, that you're pursuing, so you should do this. And he basically brings up this point several times to his father, and his father gets very, very irritated. And so what happens is then Nachiketa says, you should I'm there, so what about me? Who will you give me to? I'm pretty useful. I can be a part of the success of your sacrifice. So because he's annoyed and not thinking what he's saying, Nachiketa's father says, I'm going to give you to Yamraj. Now, Nachiketa is a little boy. He's very simple. He's very dutiful. He takes what his father says, very literally, and he says, okay, if that's the case, then I'm going to go to Yamraj. So Nachiketa goes to the death abode, and he stays there for 3 days and nights, and he doesn't have any food, he doesn't have any water. And Yamraj comes, and he's very impressed by what this little boy has done. And so he says, you have come as a guest. I'm not a fan of neglecting guests that come. So, I'm going to give you 3 boons. Okay. So the boons that are received are that Nachiketa would go back to his father, and he would want his father's anger to be replaced with love, right? He wants to know of a specific kind of sacrifice that would lead the path to heaven. Okay, that's the other thing. And then the third boon is to learn the truth about what happens after death. Now, during this whole thing, Yamraj decides to test Nachiketa a little bit, and so he tries to give him all, these riches and all that, but Nachiketa stays true to what he wants. And then Yamraj ultimately tells him that, look, your soul, your Atma, that's immortal, it's unborn, and does not die when the body dies. So in that sense, you are immortal. There's this knowledge, right? And then there's also the explanation from Yam that when you look at self-realization, you have to think of it like a chariot, right? The body is the chariot. It is driving you. Now, the charioteer who is controlling the chariot, or what is controlling the body, it is your intellect is the charioteer, and then your mind is the reins. So this is the metaphor that Yam also teaches to Nachiketa about this. So when we look at this story, it's this aspect of death is there, right? This boy's knowledge about it. But the other bigger kind of thing here is that the importance of seeking true knowledge, recognizing self-realization all over kind of the materialism that we are used to, and also recognizing, what is good, what is necessary to achieve liberation. So broadly speaking, this is the story of Nachiketa.
Thank you.
And Yamraj, yeah.
Thanks for that. So I'm going to tell two quick stories as well. One, and they both actually emphasize the point of the last thought. Okay? This is of utmost importance, as Guruji mentioned, and so many other scriptures mention it. So, story of Ajamila. It's a very, very popular story from the Bhagavad Purana. And basically, Ajamil was a Brahmin, and he was somebody who was well versed with all the Vedic wisdom and knowledge. And at some point, and I believe he had a family, he was married and all that. But at some point, he went into the forest. He was walking, and he happened to see this prostitute who was involved with this young man, and they were, whatever they were doing was on public display, if you will. And he happened to see that from behind a tree or something, and he started to feel that feeling of lust, right? And Ajamil became one of her clients, right? And eventually he said, "I love you so much, I want to marry you." At that point, what had happened was his character flipped. So once he got involved with this prostitute, he became a sinful person, basically discarded all the learning of the wisdom that he had and just completely took to sinful acts and negativity and hatefulness and stealing from people, hurting people. So it was like a completely different person. And so they got married. They had a son. The child's name, we name him Narayan. Okay? So life passed by, and at some point he was growing old and getting sick and everything. Practically he was on his deathbed. And at that point, he kind of felt like, all of this, what we described earlier, this life force is leaving him. And he was, maybe before his speech was gone, like it was about to leave, he yelled out his son's name, Narayan, because he was so attached to him. He was so attached to him. So Yamdoots were coming to get him, right? Because of he had done, essentially, I think he had done more sin in his life than good. But the Vishnu Doots, the Vishnu's messengers also came and said, "We heard the holy name of God," was the last thing he said. Even though he wasn't consciously thinking of Lord Narayan, he said the word Narayan. So that was enough for them to come. And my understanding is that neither one actually took him to either abode, but rather the Vishnu Doots said, "Okay, when we're here, you guys have to back off." So the Yamdoots left, and the Vishnu Doots said that, "Okay, we'll give you, because you weren't consciously thinking about Lord Vishnu when you said Narayan. It was your son, but you said the holy name. So that's powerful enough for us to give you an extension on life." So they restored his health and they said, you can live a few more years or whatever. And, the inspiration they were trying to give him was be a devoted person for the remainder of your life, which tells us a couple of things. One, your last thought, your last word, if you're able to utter it, it should be of that of a divine being. Second thing is, even if you've done a lot of bad things in your life, say you've been 95% bad, right? That last few years of your life, if you turn it around, then you're going in the right direction and you can still achieve liberation. You can still atone for all your sins as long as you have that genuine surrender and repentance for what you've done. Another story is the story of King Bharat. And I'm not sure who this King Bharat is because I think there's been many different Bharats. There's been Ram's brother, who this is definitely not. There's also been one who started, the Mahabharat series started with King Bharat, right? Shakuntala's son. And I don't think it's this Bharat either, but I'm not sure. So there was a King Bharat, right? And he was a good king, but time came where he's like, I'm going to let go of all of this luxuries and everything of life, and I want to go off into the forest. And it's called Vanaprastha, right? It's a phase in your life where you're like, okay, I want to walk away from all the materialism and I want to dedicate the remainder of my life in seeking the truth, right? So he goes to the forest, creates a hut for himself, and he lives there, right? And he's meditating every day. He's trying to progress spiritually, and he's getting somewhere. He's really getting somewhere, right? At that time, he sees a pregnant deer being chased by a tiger, right? And what happens is that pregnant deer, while running, essentially gives birth to the baby deer, and it falls into a ditch and dies, right? And in protection of that baby deer from the tiger, King Bharat actually goes and picks up the deer and protects it, brings it back to his hut, takes care of it, and basically it becomes his pet, right? It becomes his pet, and it's walking around his hut, and he's feeding it, he's taking care of it. So now his attention is split between his goal of reaching moksha, and this deer, this baby deer has now taken over his mind, so to speak. Okay? So at that stage in his life, attachment towards the deer takes over. And as he's nearing death, right, the thought process is, what's going to happen to this deer after I'm gone? Right? So he totally forgot about the salvation, the liberation, the moksha. He naturally felt compassion for this deer, right? So the last thought in his mind was that of the deer when he passed away. And guess what that meant? In his next life, he was reborn as a deer. So this King Bharat was reborn as a deer, but because of all the good karma he had done, he didn't forget as the deer who he was and what his goal was. So he prayed sincerely to God and said, God, if you can please give me the opportunity to be a human again, I will make sure I don't mess it up this time. So then he's reborn as this saint in a Brahmin family called Jada Bharat. So his name is Bharat, but now he's called Jada Bharata. And through that life and that birth, he finishes the job. So that last thought is significant. And that story really hits it home. So on that note, we've come to the end of our story time. And Vikram, if you would like to tell us about the other dharmic faiths, Buddhism, Sikkhism, Jainism, how do they view death and afterlife?
Absolutely. So, when looking at Buddhism actually views death not as a finality or not as an end, but as kind of a natural transition where you have your consciousness and it's continuing to go through a rebirth, but guided by your karma. So basically, you're going from one life to another. It's an endless cycle. I mean, up until you achieve nirvana, which is similar to moksha, freedom from this cycle. And, in Buddhism, it's also looked at that when you are dying, having some sort of peaceful, mindful state is key so that your rebirth is a positive one. So to clarify a few points, so Buddhism looks at rebirth and not necessarily reincarnation. So there's no permanent soul or self that goes from one body to another. Instead, it is the consciousness continues. So it's like a flame that lights another flame. So that's one aspect, right? Then, when you're born again, it happens in one of 6 realms. And these realms, it's determined very much by the karma that you accumulate. So based on the karma that you do, the words that you say, the thoughts that you have, you are born into these different realms. So if you translate it into English, it's the God realm, the demigod realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realm. And as I mentioned, that the thinking that you have as you're passing away, that's a big cornerstone of the philosophy here. So that will really influence your next life. So the focus or the emphasis that Buddhism puts is that when you die peacefully, you die fearlessly. You should be with family and you should be with spiritual folks as you do this, and that kind of helps you think more positively, right? And nirvana, which I mentioned, it's very similar to moksha. The goal is to kind of break the continuous cycle of rebirth and death and get that kind of permanent state of peace and freedom from suffering. And philosophically, Buddhists believe that death is indicative of the fact that life is very fleeting. It's not permanent, it's impermanent. So try to be as ethical and mindful as you go through life instead of fearing it. So that's the Buddhism of view of this. If we talk about Sikkhism, in Sikkhism, death is also viewed as a very natural process and leading to a journey where you merge with the divine. And they also don't look at it as an end in Sikkhism. So the soul that you have, the Atma, it survives physical death. And, but the ultimate goal here also is to escape the continuous cycle and achieve liberation and return to the divine, right? Breaking it down a little bit. So death is actually viewed upon as a gift and the end of, an earthly journey, right? So it's like if you have a drop of water and you drop it back into the ocean, that's kind of what it's like, right? The physical body is a temporary thing, but the soul is immortal and it goes through multiple lives, right? The goal is to break the cycle of reincarnation, and you do this through being graceful, you do this through meditation. So that helps with that. In terms of the afterlife, there is a realm of truth, which is the highest spiritual state where the soul reunites with God and you are then free from the cycle of life and death, right? If you don't get to that liberation, you are born again. And that is also dictated by the karma that you do. There's no belief in a heaven or hell. These are more states of consciousness. So heaven is being with God. Not being with God is hell, basically. So one very interesting aspect is that mourning for someone who has passed in Sikhism is really not encouraged. Grief is natural, but extreme mourning is not discouraged, as death is considered a joyful reunion with the divine. So here also the focus is you live honestly, you stay devoted to the divine, and then you have a positive afterlife. And then kind of finally looking at Jainism here, Jainism looks at death as the separation of your soul, the jiv, from the physical body. And this leads to immediate reincarnation based on your karma. So very similar theme here. Here also there's a belief in realms, except there's a belief in 4 realms. So you can be born in the human realm, heavenly beings, hellish beings, or what's referred to as lower life forms. But the goal is always to ultimately get to moksha and liberation from the cycle. So the soul is immortal. It continues to go between different bodies. The karma is what binds the soul to the cycle of birth and death, right? Then souls can be reborn as the different types of, beings that I mentioned, different types of realms, right? Then in the afterlife, if you were, did participate in good karma, you can go to the heavenly beings' abode, right? If you have not done good, you go to the hellish beings' abode. It's not eternal, but while you're there, it's no fun. And then moksha is the ultimate goal. You're liberated, you're free from all karma, and you're forever, with the divine. When you are dying, your mind should be calm and peaceful and focused on spiritual matters.
Yeah.
And so ultimately in Jainism, your body is a temporary holder of the soul. Death should not be feared. Rather, it is a natural transition, and you approach it with a sense of detachment and spirituality. So that is a snapshot of these 3 faiths.
Wonderful. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, you can really see the connections there. There's so many. At this time, we have come around to our spiritual spotlight segment. And for that, before I actually reveal the special spiritual personality that we're going to discuss today, I wanted to introduce a very special friend, I would say teacher, mentor, inspiration for me. She lives close by to my home, and I've had the good fortune of being invited to her home for wonderful satsangs several times, and she so kindly invited me. And she's also one who has wanted to impart the great wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita in Hindi and in English, and she was holding some sessions in her home, and I was really blessed to be a part of those sessions. So I'm very thankful to have the one and only Sonali Jog ji with us. And she's a great bhakti practitioner, bhakti yogi or yogini, a great devotee of Lord Krishna. And just her bhakti and her devotion that she does unassumingly is such a wonderful inspiration for me, and I'm sure so many who know her. So with that, I'd like to welcome Sonali ji to the show.
Thank you so much, Brad. I'm really happy to, always I'm and I'm ready to talk about Krishna with everyone and all the devotees. Especially, I know that how you much fond of Krishna. So I am really grateful to you for calling me or for inviting me to speak about one of the really, really great and the rare compassionate incarnation of Krishna.
Yes, absolutely. So before we reveal that name, I just want to say that, we just finished talking about very, very heavy topic of physical death of this mortal body, and what happens to the soul afterwards. There's a lot of scriptures that speak about that. And of course, it's important for us to know that. But it's a very, very hard-hitting topic. And I think at this time we need something to bring us back to relaxation, calmness, bring our heart and mind some solace and some sweetness. So on that note, I would like you to shed some light on this great personality that we know worldwide as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who we see, for many of you who know who I'm speaking about, this will be a wonderful refresher for you, or you may learn something new today. But for those of you who don't know Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at all, I can at least tell you this much, that he's one of the deities that you see at the altar in the Hare Krishna temples, the ISKCON temples primarily. You see wonderful paintings, depictions, and quite often you see these two deities that with their hands raised up in the air, and one of them is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So with that, Sonali ji, please tell us about his life, his legacy, and his wonderful teachings.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is little different than other incarnations of the Krishna, because they all come with this paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chatushkruta dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So on that note, they are here to even to protect the devotees and to kill the demons and the demonic mentality. But Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came with very, very different purpose. I mean, Krishna in Dwapar Yuga, in Bhagavad Gita, he demanded that you surrender unto me sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. That was the last shloka, last instructions of the Krishna, where he demanded devotion, demanded complete surrender. But this amazing incarnation, most compassionate incarnation of the Krishna, he came here to actually teach us how to surrender. So he took he came to our level, to our position, and showed us how you can do devotee and how you can love Krishna. So he's here for many reasons, but I will tell you some external reasons are there and some internal reasons. So external reasons are that every yuga is having some dharma. Like Kali Yuga is having the Nama Sankirtan Yajna. Before that was Dwapar, where people used to do the deity worship. And before that, Treta, in which there were a lot of yajnas. And before that was Satya Yuga, where there were meditation and tapa was done. So Nama Sankirtan is the easiest of all, but it is most beneficial. But we should do it in a right mood, in the right consciousness, and that is what exactly Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is teaching here to all of us. He is, he's here to give us that love for Lord Krishna and Radharani. I mean, that is what is big time missing, because sometimes we do it very yantrik. I'll say that word is in Hindi, but very, it's a mechanical. I mean, I remember that I was taught so many shlokas in the childhood, including Ram Raksha. And from past 2-3 years, when I'm understanding the meaning behind it, every word makes so much sense. So here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not only giving us love for Krishna, Radharani, and also giving the mood in which we should chant the Mahamantra. So his main purpose is to spread this Krishna's love everywhere and, start this Sankirtan movement. So means congregational chanting, all the people will come together and they will chant loudly together. And there are a lot of things that comes out of it, very, very beneficial for everyone who is listening, even to the trees, even to the animals. I mean, everyone, this is very most beneficial thing. So here, this is an external reason, but I'll say the internal reason is that desiring to understand the glory of Radharani's love and, the wonderful qualities in him that she alone relishes through her love. That is what Krishna wanted to really experience. And the happiness she feels when she, realizes the sweetness of his love, that too Krishna really wanted to experience. So Krishna appeared in the mood of Radharani and experienced this wonderful love by becoming the greatest devotee of Krishna. So all you will see in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life is he acted like a devotee and never ever showed his kind of avatar or the mood of a Krishna. It was very rarely and it was very secretly to some of his very close associates. He had shown his form, but it was very, very secret. All the time he showed or posed himself as a devotee. So that is a very, very important thing. And that's why he was very compassionate. He was, I mean, we will go and you will see throughout these stories that how compassionate he was. But let me tell you that, like, I'm taking references from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and that book is written by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who wrote like all the incidences from Gauranga or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life here in this book. And then there is one more book, is Chaitanya Bhagavat, which is written by Vrindavan Das Thakur. And both these books are wonderful if you want to, know more details about the stories that I'm going to tell. So he appeared as a son of Sachi Mata and Jagannath Mishra ji. So when he appeared in Bengal, West Bengal, there is a place called as a Navadvip Dham. Today we call it as a Mayapur. There is a huge, wonderful temple of Krishna. You go there and you will see so many wonderful, around that temple and in that so small villages, so many places. Actually, you can visit that. Oh, here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu walked. Here he did this Leela. Here he did. So I had been there, and it's a very wonderful feeling, walking and experiencing those Leelas again. So he appeared, and as I said, that like his birth was just, we celebrated his birth. It was a Falgun Purnima, which is also called as, we celebrate as a Holy Purnima. So it was on the Purnima day, and there was a lunar eclipse. And in India, generally, when there is an eclipse, lunar or solar eclipse, people try to chant as much as they can, because during that time they don't want to do any other things, or eating, sleeping, or any kind of activities, but to chant Krishna's name and surrender unto him completely. So it's so wonderful that he appeared to establish this Sankirtan movement. He appeared to show the world importance of the name. And from the birth, he started his work, right there, right that time, people were chanting, and that's when he appeared on this birth. So his birth name is Nimai, because he took birth under a neem tree. But also there were so many other wonderful names. He's known by Vishwambhar too, like, by the birth chart, it was predicted that he will take care of. There are like many predictions were done, and because of that, they said that like Vishwambhar is a very appropriate name for him. Later, he was called as a Gauranga Mahaprabhu, Gaura Hari, Gaura Sundar, Sri Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Bharati. That is also one of his names. So these are all the names of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So from the birth, as I explained, that like very birth time, everyone was chanting, and neighbors, everyone used to come to play with him, because he was the most beautiful and attractive baby. But he used to cry a lot, and when someone will say that Hari Bol, he used to keep quiet. So it was like he was giving kind of a training to everyone around him to kind of a chant. So everyone around him keeps like saying Hari Bol, and like to Krishna's different names in front of him. And that's how he grew up in a very wonderful environment. When he was very, very young, that time very wonderful incidents happened, and that is one of my favorite. So once a Brahmin, he was a very effulgent and very tapasvi Brahmin, I'll say that, like he was very particular about what he will eat. He used to eat only Krishna Prasad, and while wandering into many different places, he will just get some fruits, offer it to Krishna, and then consume it. Sometimes even if he will not get anything, whatever is the water, he will offer it to Krishna and consume it. So if you do the tapasya for a very long time in a right intention, automatically that effulgence, everyone around you will also recognize you, and they will also see that. So he visited Jagannath Mishra ji, that is like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's house once. And both host, Jagannath Mishra ji and his wife, they were so happy to, see him. And they said that they requested him to come and have some food at their house, some prasadam. But his another rule was that he himself will cook that, whatever offering he will do to Krishna. So they cleaned the kitchen, made everything ready, and just requested him to do that. He got the opportunity to offer like wonderful feast to Krishna. So with that mood, he cooked many items, and then he was very happy, that very satisfied that like today I'm going to offer Krishna so many wonderful dishes. And he sat there, and then he started offering this, chanting the prayers and calling Krishna with his heart that Krishna, please come and accept my offering. And that very moment, Nimai, our just little boy, who was playing, he was playing that time in the evening time in the front yard, all like, muddy, dirty, and like, he didn't even do any kind of, washing hand, or he didn't do any formalities. He came running because that Brahmin was calling him, and he just took some prasadam from that plate. And then the Brahmin got little bit like, he said that, oh, how can I offer it to Krishna? Because this boy is full of like, dirt and all. And he was having so many rules and regulation that he was following, that do not touch this and touch that. And he said that, no, now I can't offer this to Krishna, and I can't consume food which is not offered properly to Krishna. So Jagannath Mishra ji got so upset. I mean, he was like scolding Nimai, but then he said, he stopped him. He said that, no, he's just a boy. It's okay. So then he requested that, like, you can you please do it again? And then one more time, same sequence happened. So that time, actually, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was kept in the neighbor's house, and all the ladies were like, kind of guarding that, like, he should not leave the place. But somehow he came because the Brahmin started calling. And then all the ladies got upset. He said, what is this, Nimai? Why are you going there? And he said that, like, he's calling me. That's why I'm going. No one believed, or no one even understood what that means is. Then Brahmin said that, like, I think Krishna is not ready to accept whatever I cooked. And today he want me to fast. So I accept that. And I really don't want to worry about it anymore. But then everyone was requesting him that, please, can you cook it again? Because we don't feel right. You are, sleeping empty stomach. And that time, Nimai Pandit's older brother, he came back from his study. And he was so effulgent because he himself was also Krishna's Ansha avatar. And looking at him, that Brahmin was so mesmerized that he said that, oh my God, this boy is so wonderful. And then he personally requested again that, can you please, I mean, we understand all the effort that you are taking and how this Nimai is like, disturbing you. I'm really sorry from his behalf, but please make it one more time so that we all will feel happy. And on his request, he decided to cook one last time. And in the meantime, here, Nimai was looking at all this, and he knew this Brahmin is very devotionally calling him. So Nimai really wanted to show him his like original form. He wanted to give him his darshan. So third time when this person cooked, everyone, like, Nimai was sleeping, and everyone said that, like, oh, you go ahead and now, you off do your offering. He's sleeping. But that moment when he started calling Krishna, because of the Nimai's yoga maya, everyone in the family, they slept. And then the little boy, he got up from the bed and he ran to the temple room where he was offering food to the Krishna. And that time he took some prasadam, but at the same time, he showed his original form. He showed him actually that time 800 form. It is said that, like, all the 400, they were holding the Shankha, Chakra, Gada, and Padma, and the two hands were like eating butter, and the other two hands were like, holding flute. So Brahmin was so happy to see that beautiful, form of Krishna. And then he started crying, and he was so happy that he couldn't even speak anything. And that time, little Nimai, who was showing that form, he started telling him that, you used to come to Nanda Maharaj, also Nanda Maharaj's house, and cook for me. So I accepted your service that time, and with the great fortune, you're here again, and I really wanted to accept whatever you were offering to me, and that's why I came. And then the Brahmin was so happy. He just smeared all the rice to his body. He started eating it. He was started dancing it. Everyone in the family, they woke up and they started seeing it, look at him, and they were like wondering what happened. And then he was so happy. But Krishna took the promise from him that he's never ever going to say all the story and never ever expose this form, because it's a secret Gupta avatar. And then as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lived for another like 34 years, and never ever everyone knew that. But then after that it was revealed. So this is one story. Then another like childhood story that I really like a lot is that once he was sitting with his mother and father in the front yard, and his father said that, like, you know what, I need that book, Nimai, can you get it for me? And that time Nime ran inside the house, and he was going from one room to another room to another room. They started hearing the anklet sound. I mean, it was such a nice anklet sound. And they felt that like as if a little boy, he's running around in the house. But Nime was not wearing anything that time, and they were wondering like who is there. And when they got up from the seat, they saw the little footprints with all the chinna that you see on the Krishna's footprint. So there are so many symbols are there. And they were so pleased to see that, and they were so happy. They were touching those footprint, and they were taking darshan of those footprint, and then they went in front of the deity saying that, like, oh Krishna, you're invisibly wandering here in my house, and I'm so happy. So they didn't realize that Nima himself is a Krishna, but they felt that, like, Krishna's presence everywhere. So these are like a couple of stories from his childhood. So Nime was enjoying that all the reciprocation happening around him, because Krishna, he always like all his devotees to establish some relation with him. There are four kind of a relation. One is a dasya bhav, that is like Krishna in a mood of a servant, and considering him as his master. Then the other relation is the Sakhya Bhav, where we consider Krishna as a friend. And then, at that like friendly manner, we talk with Krishna, we call him, we can share our like problems with him. Then there is a relation which is a Vatsalya Bhav, where we consider Krishna very young, very little, and we take care of him instead of like, asking something from Krishna. Here we are protecting Krishna, we are taking care of Krishna. Oh, Lala, you will get cold. So let me, wrap you in a nice warm clothing. So it's a very, very sweet kind of a loving exchange. And then there is a Madhurya Bhav, where Krishna is considered that, like, Krishna is my lover, I'm Krishna's lover. So these are the relations that Krishna really enjoy. And so here, little Nimai was also enjoying all those relations. At the same time, he was making sure in his childhood or from his very birth that people around him, they are chanting the name of the Krishna. So that reminds me the very first verse of the Shishtastakam, that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wrote only these 8 verses, where he's showing in a way the progress, devotional progress. So the first one is something that we can conclude his early childhood with this first one. That is Cheto Darpana Marjanam Bhava Maha Tavagni Nirvapanam. So more than the Sanskrit, we will go with the meaning that the chanting of the holy name cleanses the mirror of the heart and extinguishes the fire of material suffering. So at the age of 16, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was considered as the greatest scholar in the Navadvip. I mean, the city itself is that time it was famous for the Nyaya Shastra, which is a logic. So we have like many different Shastras, Vaisheshika, Nyaya, Uttar Mimamsa, And so these are the six are very famous. So this particular Nyaya Shastra was very, very famous in Navadvip Dham, and Nimai Pandit was very expert in that. So he became so proud that he was very scholar. So he used to really find someone and then, kind of ask them questions and then argue with them and then prove his point. And like every time he used to beat everyone, then people used to think that he is too proud because Nima had not yet started the devotional service. So they used to think that, like, when he will become a devotee, he will become a very great devotee. So, like that, there are many, many pastimes, and we will go to one of the famous pastime where he was kind of debating with a Keshav Kashmiri Pandit. So, Keshav Kashmiri Pandit was a very old personality. He was a very renowned scholar, and he came to Navadvip Dham to debate with Nimai Pandit. And then that time, Nimai asked him or gave him some subject, and I think he compiled 100 line or some 100 verses long, beautiful poem in Sanskrit. And after it is finished, he said that Nimai, that like, what do you think? What do you think about this my composition? Because he did it right there and 100 shlokas and on the subject that was given by Nimai Pandit. And Nima said that, like, you know what, that 23rd verse, do you remember that you did this? You said this word, but this word is not appropriate. And he was surprised. He said that, no, I don't remember all those, like, what was the 23rd? And like that, he pointed out 64 faults in that poem or whatever that compilation. And he just fell at Nimai's feet and he said that, like, I had never seen anyone finding such a scrutinizingly examining and finding faults in my work. So he got, like, he was amazed to see Nimai's knowledge. So that is one of the very sweet pastime. And after that, the transformation happened in Nimai Pandit because he was very mischievous. He was very proud about his knowledge. But then when he met his guru, at the age of 24, he met Ishwar Puri, and that time he completely transformed. When Ishwar Puri, he gave him that mantra and Krishna's love, then he started, like, crying and exhibiting all the symptoms that, like, there is a ashta, we call it as a ashta bhav, so that you can see that, like, how the tears are flowing and hair standing. And there are so many ashtabhav that Nimai Pandit was showing because he was fully in love with Krishna and started jumping up and down. And that time, when he came back, he started this Sankirtan movement. And from there on, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was seen always with all his very close friends and his followers and his devotees, and they were chanting from places to places, from many, many villages, from the bank of the rivers. They used to chant the Krishna's name and wander and give this Krishna's name to others. So one very important event in his life is taking the Diksha, second Diksha from Advaita philosophy, because this is the Dvaita philosophy. You will see that impersonal or Advaita philosophy more prominently. And Dvaita philosophy is the one that earlier I was mentioning, that considering that Krishna is a personality, he's taking different forms and then establishing a relationship with Krishna. And then, in that love and devotion, worshipping him. The other type of philosophy is considering that, like, me and Krishna, we are not too different, and I have to merge into Krishna, and that is what is my antim moksha, or that is what is my end goal. And two philosophies go very, they are parallel in, like, for till some extent, but after that there are, like, lot of differences that you can see and pinpoint in it. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he took the sannyasa diksha and he became the Sri Krishna Chaitanya Bharati. So that is his sannyasa name. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was so much, wanted to spread the Sankirtan movement, that he accepted the sannyas and he left his home, his wife, And at the age of 24, he started living in Jagannath Puri. Last thing, how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he finished his avatar, so that time it was, he, it's not that like he left his body and like, it was like he just disappeared, he vanished. Some people say that like during the Rath Yatra, he merged into Jagannath. And some says that like while doing the kirtan, he just vanished, he just went. So these are the story when he finished his avatar, he finished his work here, then he left this planet in such a way. So with this Dvait and Advait, these two philosophies, he came up with the Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva. That is how we and Krishna, or we and Brahma, that is what is in Advait term, that we are same, but we are still different. That he is a Vibhu and we are Anu, and like lot of differences are shown. And then how we are two different, but at the same time qualitatively we are same, quantitatively we are different. And that is what is a Achintya Bheda Bhed philosophy. And that is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu he offered, and that is what is Brahma Gaudiya Sampradaya. He accepted that. So I will stop here because there are many, many stories and I can go on, but I'll stop here. But I must say that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wrote few literature, but it is not available today. The only thing that is available is his Shishtastakam. Ashta means 8, Shiksha means like teachings. So whatever 8 teachings that he gave to the world, that is the only thing that is available today. And those 8 verses, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is teaching us how to love Krishna and how to surrender him completely, thinking yourself like a very, very small and insignificant. And if you see that many other personalities or many other saintly literature, they are giving the same messages, that keep away your ego. And when you go in front of a God, and when you see God in everyone's, then, become humble. So how to become a humble, how to surrender, that is what is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's these 8 verses are teaching us.
I just wanted to ask, before we close this, the other deity who is also raising his hands, who's next to Sri Chaitanya, who is that personality? And if you can just briefly describe the relation between that deity and Gauranga.
Yeah, sure. The other deity is Nityananda Prabhu. And Nityananda Prabhu he was born in a different place and he was older than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he came searching for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he was a Balram, or Krishna's very dear, Ansha avatar. And every incarnation when Krishna goes, Krishna is going along with his Parshad, or like a very close associate. So Balaram is a very, very close associate of Krishna. He's a Sheshanath. He was there in the Ram avatar as a Lakshman. He was always there with the Krishna, and that is the other personality, that is a Nityananda Prabhu. We also consider him as a teacher, as a guru, as a main guru. So like if you ignore Nityananda Prabhu and try to approach Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will not be pleased. So you have to worship Nityananda Prabhu, and he's like a guru who will take you to the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So you have to always remember that like both are always together, and you have to give the equal, I'll say that like equal love, devotion, respect to both of them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Again,
for joining us on Divine Discoveries podcast. We really appreciate your presence and all that you contributed and brought to us, while we did the spotlight on Sri Chaitanya.
Yeah, thank you. You're doing wonderful work. It's very nice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. You're welcome. Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.
And with that, we come to the conclusion of the episode for today. And, we spoke about this concept of death. As Guruji said, life is a preparation for that. So don't lose focus of that. If anything, be more conscious of it. Doesn't mean that you have to think about it all the time. But I think just act wisely and do the right thing, help people, do good. And I'm sure good will be coming upon you. So wish you all the best. And if anybody has any feedback, please let us know. We do intend to speak about birth because that's another big topic. So we'll tackle that, if not next month, the month after, because I think next month we're planning to speak about Shri Hanumanji, whose Jayanti is coming up. So we're going to speak about that, and then we'll come back to this karma series. But thank you, Vikram, for your contribution. And we thank Sonali Ji once again for speaking about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in our spiritual spotlight segment. Until next time, may you all be well. Take care. Om Shanti.